No one could explain why the forest had so many names. Some had been carved so deeply that moss had grown inside the letters. Others looked as if they had been carved only hours earlier. Locals called it Blackwood Forest, a place where people hiked only during daylight, a place children were warned about before they were old enough to understand why. Most visitors believed those stories were nothing more than local folklore, until someone found a name that should not have been there. It happened in late October. The first frost had settled over the hills. The trees stood almost bare, their branches twisted together like giant skeletal hands. A wildlife photographer named Daniel Mercer arrived before sunrise. He had spent years documenting Europe's oldest forests. His work had taken him through abandoned villages, forgotten castles, and mountain valleys where almost nobody lived anymore. Blackwood Forest was supposed to be another ordinary assignment. His goal was simple: photograph ancient oak trees before winter arrived, nothing more. The morning remained unusually quiet. No birds, no insects, only the sound of leaves moving beneath his boots. Even the wind seemed afraid to enter the woods. Several hours passed without finding anything unusual. Then Daniel noticed something. One enormous oak stood alone at the top of a small hill. Its trunk was far wider than any tree he had ever seen. The bark looked black instead of brown. As he moved closer, strange marks became visible. Letters. Hundreds of them. Names covered every side of the trunk. Some were almost impossible to read. Others remained perfectly clear despite looking centuries old. Daniel slowly walked around the tree. Each step revealed more names. Thousands of them. Different handwriting, different languages, different decades. It looked impossible. No ordinary tree could survive that much damage. Yet the oak remained alive. Its branches stretched high above the forest. Healthy, silent, watching. Daniel raised his camera. Every photograph looked normal. But standing in front of the tree felt different. The air became colder. His breathing slowed. An uncomfortable feeling settled over him, as though someone stood only a few feet away, watching him. He searched behind every nearby tree. Nothing. The forest remained empty. Then his eyes stopped on one carving. The cuts were fresh. Wood shavings still rested at the base of the trunk. Someone had carved this name recently. Very recently. The name read, Thomas Elwood. Daniel immediately recognized it. Earlier that morning, while buying coffee in the nearby village, everyone had been talking about Thomas, a 32-year-old schoolteacher, missing for 3 days. Police believed he had disappeared while walking his dog. Search teams had found nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no body, nothing. Yet his name was now carved into this ancient tree. Daniel touched the fresh letters. The wood felt strangely warm, almost alive. He stepped backward, trying to convince himself someone had created a cruel joke. He photographed the carving from every possible angle, then hurried back toward the village. The local police officer barely looked at the photographs. He sighed, then pushed them back across the desk. "You found the old tree." Daniel nodded. "The missing man's name is carved into it." The officer remained silent. Finally he spoke. "It isn't the first time." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" The officer leaned back. "There have always been names. People carve them. It's just another forest legend. But this name is fresh. So, Thomas disappeared 3 days ago." "Exactly." Daniel waited for an explanation. None came. Instead, the officer quietly changed the subject. "You should leave before sunset." Daniel noticed something strange. The officer never denied the photographs. He never questioned them. He never asked where the tree was. It sounded as though he already knew. Outside the station, the atmosphere felt different. People watched him through their windows. An elderly woman standing outside the church crossed herself as he walked past. A shopkeeper quickly locked his door. Children stopped playing. Nobody smiled. Nobody spoke. Only one old man approached him. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "If the forest knows your name, don't go back." Before Daniel could ask another question, the old man walked away. That evening, Daniel reviewed every photograph. Hundreds of images filled his computer. The tree appeared exactly as he remembered. Thousands of carved names. One fresh carving. Thomas Elwood. Then he opened the final photograph. Something changed. He zoomed in. Between two old carvings, a few new scratches had appeared. They were too small to read. Daniel frowned. He compared the image with another photograph taken only seconds earlier. The scratches had not been there before. His heart began pounding. He enlarged the image again. The scratches were becoming letters. Not complete, Not yet. But someone, or something, seemed to be carving another name. And the photograph had been taken when nobody else was standing near the tree. Daniel barely slept. He spent the entire night comparing every photograph. The strange scratches were real. In one image, the bark looked untouched. In the next, thin lines appeared. Then another photograph revealed more cuts. Each picture had been taken only seconds apart. It looked impossible. No person had walked near the tree. No shadow. No movement. Nothing. By sunrise, Daniel had made his decision. He would stay. The village woke slowly. Cold fog rolled through the narrow streets. Stone cottages disappeared behind the mist. Everything felt older than it should, almost frozen in time. Daniel returned to the cafe where he had eaten breakfast the day before. The room became silent as soon as he entered. Every conversation stopped. People looked away. The waitress approached with forced politeness. "You should leave." Daniel smiled. "I'm only asking a few questions." She shook her head. "No? What do you know about Blackwood Forest?" She placed the coffee on the table. Her hands trembled. "We don't speak about that place." "Why not?" "Because it listens." Before Daniel could ask another question, she walked away. An elderly customer quietly stood beside his table. Without saying a word, he slipped a folded piece of paper into Daniel's hand. Then he left. Outside, Daniel unfolded it. Only one sentence was written. "Ask the priest." The village church stood on a small hill. Its stone walls were blackened with age. Inside, dozens of candles burned. Despite the daylight, an old priest arranged books near the altar. He looked up before Daniel spoke. "I knew someone would come." "You know why I'm here?" The priest nodded. "You found the tree." Daniel slowly placed the photograph on the table. The missing man's name was already there. The priest stared at the picture for several seconds. His expression changed. "You touched it." Daniel hesitated. "Yes." The priest closed his eyes. "You should not have done that." "Why?" Instead of answering, the priest walked toward an old wooden cabinet. He unlocked it with a small iron key. Inside were dozens of worn leather books. Some were hundreds of years old. He opened one carefully. Every page listed names, dates, ages, occupations, and one final note beside each entry: "Never returned." Daniel turned another page. Then another. The records continued for centuries. Hundreds of missing people. Some had vanished during wars, others while hunting. Some simply disappeared while walking home. Every case ended the same way: never returned. Daniel noticed something strange. Many entries had another sentence: "Name found in the forest." He looked up. "These are real records?" The priest nodded. "Our church has kept them since the 17th century. You believe the forest is responsible?" "I believe the forest remembers." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" The priest remained silent. Finally he answered. "The names appear first. The people disappear later." Daniel stared at him. "That's impossible." "I know, but it has happened before." Daniel quickly searched through the old records. Most names belonged to people long forgotten. Then one entry caught his attention. Anna Weiss. Missing. October 1984. Beside her name, someone had written another note. Carving discovered 4 days before disappearance. Daniel looked at the priest. "You're saying her name appeared before she vanished?" "Yes." "Who carved it?" "No one ever saw." Daniel felt cold. If the records were true, Thomas Elwood's disappearance had already followed the same pattern. But then another question appeared. How many names already carved into the tree belonged to people who were still alive? The priest slowly closed the book. "You need to leave. I need to see the tree again." "No. I need answers." The old man's voice became firmer. "The forest gives answers. It also takes those who ask." Daniel left the church with more questions than before. Outside, rain had started falling. As he crossed the village square, he noticed something unusual. Several houses had strange wooden symbols above their doors. Small carvings, almost hidden beneath years of paint. The same symbol appeared again and again. Every older house displayed it. Daniel photographed each one. An elderly woman noticed. She rushed toward him. "You must delete those." "What are they?" "They keep the whispers outside." Before he could respond, she hurried back indoors. That evening, Daniel examined every symbol. Then he compared them with photographs from the ancient tree. His stomach tightened. The exact same symbol had been carved near the base of the giant oak, hidden beneath layers of moss, almost invisible. It wasn't just a warning. It was a seal. Someone had tried to lock something inside the forest. And judging by the fresh names, it wasn't working anymore. Rain continued through the night. By morning, Blackwood Forest had disappeared behind a wall of mist. Daniel stood at the edge of the trees. The village behind him felt strangely distant. No one had tried to stop him. No one had wished him luck. The silence itself felt like a warning. He unfolded an old forestry map he had found in the church archives. Most trails had faded with time. One location had been circled in red ink. Ranger Station 14. The map carried one handwritten note. Abandoned, 1987. Daniel followed the forgotten trail. Branches blocked the path. Thick ivy swallowed old wooden signs. After nearly 2 hours, he saw it. A small cabin leaned against the hillside. Its roof had partially collapsed. The windows were broken. The front door hung open. Inside, everything remained exactly where someone had left it. A rusted lantern. A kettle on a cold stove. A chair lying on its side. Dust covered every surface. Yet something felt wrong. There were no animal nests. No signs that nature had reclaimed the building. It was as if the forest had chosen to leave it untouched. Daniel searched every room. Most drawers were empty. Old maps had rotted away. Then, he discovered a locked metal cabinet beneath a staircase. The lock had already rusted through. With one pull, the door opened. Inside lay dozens of notebooks. Most had been destroyed by moisture. Only one remained readable. Its cover read, Forest Ranger Elias Brenner, 1987. Daniel opened the first page. The handwriting was neat. The early entries described routine patrols, storm damage, wildlife sightings, nothing unusual. Then, several weeks later, the tone changed. Something is carving the trees. Daniel kept reading. I checked every trail. No people. No tools. Every morning, there are new names. Another entry. The carvings are fresh. They bleed sap for hours. By evening, they already look years old. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. The journal continued. Day after day, the ranger had become obsessed. He mapped every carved tree, photographed every new name, stayed awake through entire nights. Yet he never saw anyone carving them. Then came an entry underlined 3 times. Tonight I heard voices, hundreds of them. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking to each other. Daniel stopped reading. The cabin felt colder. He looked toward the broken doorway. Only the forest stood outside. Still, silent. He continued. The ranger described whispers drifting through the trees after midnight. At first they sounded like wind. Then individual words became clear. Eventually, names. Nothing but names. Hundreds of names. Repeated over and over. Some belonged to people who had disappeared years earlier. Others belonged to villagers who were still alive. Daniel turned another page. The handwriting suddenly became shaky, uneven, almost desperate. I heard my own name. Only once, I answered. The next page contained only one sentence. That was my mistake. Daniel swallowed hard. Several pages had been torn out. Who removed them? The final remaining entry had been written only hours before Elias Brenner disappeared. The old oak is not the source. It is only the door. Below that, one final line, written so deeply that the pen had almost torn through the paper. Do not let it learn your name. The journal ended there. No farewell, no explanation, no final report. Daniel searched the cabinet again. Beneath the journal, he found an old cassette recorder. Its batteries had long since corroded, but the tape remained inside. He slipped it into his backpack. As he prepared to leave, something caught his eye. A wall map. Tiny colored pins marked dozens of locations across Blackwood Forest. Every pin had a date. Every date matched a known disappearance from the church records. Except one. A red pin, placed deep inside the oldest part of the forest. No date. No name. Only one word. Origin. Daniel photographed the map. Then a sound echoed outside. Crunch. A single footstep. He froze. Another. Slow. Heavy. Circling the cabin. Daniel rushed to the doorway. No one. Only fog drifting between the trees. Then another sound, this time behind him. Inside the cabin. He turned instantly. The room was empty. The journal still lay on the table. But one page had turned by itself. Daniel stepped closer. He hadn't opened this page before. Across the center, written in faded ink, was a sentence he was certain hadn't been there moments ago. It knows you're reading. Daniel's breathing stopped. He grabbed the journal and back toward the door. As he stepped outside, a cold breeze moved through the trees. Then the whispers began. Soft, almost impossible to hear. At first, they sounded like leaves moving in the wind. Then they became words, one voice, then another, then hundreds, all repeating the same thing. One name, his name. Daniel did not run. Every instinct told him to. But years of documenting dangerous places had taught him one rule: never panic. The whispers continued. Soft, constant, hidden beneath the sound of moving leaves. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a digital audio recorder. If the voices were real, the recorder would capture them. He pressed record. The screen lit up. Everything seemed normal. The sound meter barely moved. Yet Daniel could still hear the whispers. His name drifted through the trees, over and over. Then, silence. The forest became unnaturally still. Even the wind stopped. Daniel hurried back toward the village without looking behind him. That evening, he transferred the recording to his laptop. He expected nothing. Instead, the audio waveform was full. Someone, or something, had been speaking almost continuously. He put on his headphones. At first, there was only the sound of footsteps, then a faint whisper, another. Soon dozens of overlapping voices filled the recording. Most were impossible to understand, until one sentence became perfectly clear. He's listening now. Daniel immediately paused the recording. The voice was calm, almost human. He rewound. The sentence was still there. He played it again. This time another whisper followed. He knows the tree. Daniel removed the headphones. Someone had been standing close to him, close enough for the microphone to record every word. Yet no one had appeared in the forest. The next morning, he returned to the church. The priest looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. You went back. Daniel placed the recorder on the table. Listen. The priest refused. I've heard them before. You know what they are? The old man slowly shook his head. I only know that everyone who follows the voices disappears. Daniel hesitated. I'm going back tonight. The priest's expression hardened. No, I need proof. You already have proof. I need answers. The priest walked toward the church window. For several seconds, he stared into the forest beyond the village. Then he spoke quietly. There is one rule. What rule? If you hear your name, never answer. Daniel spent the afternoon preparing. Fresh batteries, extra memory cards, 2 cameras, a thermal camera, a drone, an infrared video recorder, 3 audio recorders. If something existed in Blackwood Forest, he intended to document it. Just before sunset, he crossed the old wooden bridge leading into the woods. This time, he noticed something he had missed before. Every railing post carried deep scratches. Names, hundreds of them. Weathered by decades of rain, it was as if the forest had slowly spread beyond its own borders. Darkness arrived quickly beneath the trees. Daniel reached the ancient oak just before midnight. He positioned cameras in every direction. One aimed directly at the carved trunk. Another watched the surrounding forest. The audio recorders were placed several meters apart. If whispers came from different directions, he would know. Midnight arrived, nothing happened. 1 o'clock, still nothing. The forest remained completely silent. Daniel began wondering if fear had clouded his judgment. Then, a single whisper, almost too quiet to hear. He checked the recorder. The sound meter jumped sharply. Another whisper came from behind him. Then another from his left. Soon voices surrounded him. Not shouting, not screaming, simply speaking. Hundreds of quiet conversations, as though invisible people stood between the trees. Daniel slowly turned. His flashlight revealed nothing, only darkness. Then, one voice became louder than the others. It spoke directly behind his right shoulder, close enough to feel its breath. Daniel! He spun around. No one. The flashlight illuminated empty forest. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Again, even closer. Daniel! He remembered the priest's warning. Never answer. The whisper continued. Patient, gentle, almost comforting. It sounded like someone asking an old friend to come closer. Then another voice joined it. Then another. Soon hundreds of voices repeated the same word, his name. Again, again, again. Daniel backed away from the tree. His foot struck something. He looked down. Fresh wood shavings. They hadn't been there earlier. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his flashlight toward the trunk. His blood ran cold. A new carving had appeared beneath the fresh name of Thomas Elwood. Only a few letters were visible. The cuts looked brand new, still leaking sap. The first letters read, D-A-N. Daniel froze. Someone, or something, had just begun carving his name. Daniel stumbled backward. His flashlight shook in his hand. The fresh carving was real. The bark had been untouched only minutes earlier. Now 3 letters were cut so deeply that clear sap slowly trickled down the trunk. D-A-N. He searched the ground. No knife, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. The cameras were still recording. Whatever had happened, it had happened without anyone standing near the tree. Daniel grabbed every piece of equipment and left the forest before dawn. Underscore. The first light of morning revealed a village that looked even quieter than before. Curtains moved behind windows. People watched him. No one came outside. It was as if they already knew where he had been. Daniel locked himself inside his rented cottage. He copied every recording onto his laptop. The first camera showed the ancient oak from 30 feet away. The timestamp moved normally. 11:58 p.m. 11:59 p.m. Midnight. Nothing. Then, at exactly 12:17 a.m., the image flickered, only for a fraction of a second. When the picture became clear again, the carving had changed. The letters were already there. No movement. No person. No explanation. The name simply existed. Daniel replayed the footage 10 times. The same result every time. The thermal camera revealed something even stranger. There were no human heat signatures, only Daniel. But between the trees, cold shapes drifted through the forest. Dozens of them. They were darker than the surrounding night, moving slowly, circling the tree. None had a recognizable human form. Each disappeared before reaching the camera. Underscore. That afternoon, Daniel visited the regional archives several miles away. If the village refused to talk, history might not. Hours passed among dusty newspapers and forgotten police files. One report immediately caught his attention. May 14, 1962. 3 university students had entered Blackwood Forest. Only 1 camera was recovered. The students were never found. Daniel requested the evidence photographs. Most showed ordinary camping equipment. Then he saw the final image. An enormous oak tree, covered in names, exactly the same tree. The report listed one disturbing observation. The investigating officer had counted every visible carving. There were 1,483 names. Daniel enlarged his own recent photograph. He began counting. Hours later, he finished. There were now 2,117 names. More than 600 new names had appeared in 64 years. Underscore. Another file described a search operation from 1931. Villagers claimed they had seen a missing shepherd walking through the forest. The search team followed him. He remained about 50 yards ahead. Always visible, never close enough to reach. After several hours, he disappeared into the fog. The shepherd was never seen again. Neither were the 4 men following him. Underscore. One report after another told the same impossible story. Missing people. Sightings after disappearance. Voices calling relatives into the woods. No bodies, no evidence, only names. Always the names. Underscore. Late that evening, Daniel returned to the church. The priest waited beside a wooden table. Without speaking, he opened an old leather box. Inside were faded photographs. Black and white portraits, families, children, hunters, travelers. Every picture had been recovered after someone disappeared. Daniel noticed something strange. In almost every photograph, there was a forest somewhere in the background, sometimes only a few trees, sometimes an entire hillside. The missing person always faced the camera, but someone else stood farther back, half hidden, watching. Daniel looked closer. The figure appeared in every photograph. Same height, same dark outline. No face, no details. Just a silhouette standing between the trees. Who is that? The priest slowly closed the box. No one knows. Has anyone identified it? No. Then why is it always there? The old man answered quietly. Because the missing never walked alone. Underscore. That night, Daniel spread every document across his room. Maps, photographs, journal pages, police reports. One detail suddenly connected everything. Every disappearance had happened within 7 days of a new name appearing in the forest. Not before, not months later. Always within 1 week. Daniel looked at the calendar. Thomas Elwood had disappeared 3 days ago. His own name had started appearing tonight. If the pattern continued, he had only 4 days left. Then his laptop made a sound. One of the motion-activated cameras had uploaded a delayed backup from the forest. It was a single photograph, taken automatically after Daniel had already left. The ancient oak stood alone in the darkness. No people, no movement. But beneath the unfinished carving, someone had completed another letter. The bark now read, D-A-N-I. The carving was still growing, and Daniel had not been there to see it happen. Daniel didn't sleep. He spent the entire night staring at the latest photograph. The carving had changed again. No person, no tool, no explanation, only one more letter. It now read, D-A-N-I-T. He measured the cuts against the photograph from the previous night. The grooves were deeper, older, as if they had been carved years ago instead of hours earlier. The impossible was becoming routine, and that frightened him more than anything. Underscore. At sunrise, Daniel unfolded the old ranger's map once again. His eyes stopped on the single red mark. Origin. If the ancient oak was only a door, then something else waited deeper inside the forest. Something older. He packed lightly. One camera, a flashlight, the journal. Enough food for a day. Before leaving, he knocked on the priest's door. The old man answered immediately, almost as if he had been expecting him. "I know where you're going." Daniel nodded. "I have to find the place marked on the map." The priest looked toward the forest. His face had lost all color. No one who reached it ever came back. Has anyone actually found it? The priest hesitated. One man. The ranger? No. My grandfather. Daniel remained silent. The priest continued. He returned before sunrise. But he never spoke again. He lived another 20 years. And every morning, he checked whether his name had appeared. Underscore Daniel entered Blackwood Forest, shortly before noon. The familiar trail disappeared after less than a mile. Beyond that point, the forest changed. The trees grew taller, older. Their trunks twisted into unnatural shapes. The air became colder with every step. His compass began spinning. GPS disappeared. Even the sunlight struggled to reach the ground. It felt less like entering a forest, and more like entering another world. Hours passed. Then Daniel noticed something strange. The trees around him carried carvings. Not names, symbols. The same symbol he had seen above the village doors. Hundreds of them, each carved into a different tree, each facing inward, toward the center of the forest. They weren't warnings, they were barriers. A ring, built to surround something. Underscore. The deeper he walked, the quieter everything became. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind. His own footsteps seemed strangely distant. Then he found footprints. Fresh. Boot prints. Only one set, leading ahead. Daniel followed them. After several hundred yards, they simply ended. No return prints. No struggle. No drag marks. It looked as though the person had taken one final step and vanished. 2. Underscore. The trees suddenly opened into a vast clearing. Daniel stopped breathing. In the center stood the largest tree he had ever seen. It dwarfed the ancient oak. Its trunk was so enormous that dozens of people could not have encircled it. Its branches disappeared into the fog above. The bark wasn't brown, it was almost black, like burned wood. Every inch of it was covered in names. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Some carvings had nearly disappeared beneath centuries of growth. Others looked fresh enough to touch. Daniel slowly approached. His flashlight revealed names from different countries, different centuries, different languages. Latin, German, French, English, Polish, Italian. Some dates stretched back more than 500 years. The forest had been collecting names long before anyone living could remember. Then Daniel noticed something impossible. Near the center of the trunk, one name stood alone. Unlike every other carving, it had no moss, no weathering, no age. It looked brand new. He stepped closer. His heart nearly stopped. It wasn't his name. It was Elias Brenner, the missing ranger, the man whose journal Daniel carried. Beneath it, another carving had begun. Fresh sap still glistened in the cuts. Only 5 letters were visible. Danny, one more letter than yesterday. The carving was continuing. Even while Daniel stood there, he instinctively looked around the clearing. No one. Nothing moved. Then, a drop of sap landed beside his boot. He looked up. The tree wasn't bleeding sap. It was flowing downward from somewhere above, slowly, thickly, like fresh tears, and from high within the branches, a whisper drifted through the still air. Not hundreds of voices this time, only one, calm, patient, waiting. It spoke just 3 words. Almost finished now. Daniel's legs refused to move. The whisper echoed through the clearing long after the voice had fallen silent. Almost finished now. He aimed his flashlight into the branches. The beam climbed higher and higher. It never reached the top. The tree disappeared into darkness. It was far taller than it had looked from the ground. Then something moved. Not a branch, not an animal, a shadow. It slipped behind the trunk and vanished. Daniel raised his camera and began taking photographs. The flash burst across the clearing. Once, twice. Again, nothing appeared. The tree stood alone, silent, motionless. He lowered the camera. Another whisper drifted from above. This time it sounded different, almost amused. Daniel looked at the screen. His blood turned cold. The photographs did not match what he had seen. In every image, dark figures stood around the tree, dozens of them, perfectly still. Each faced the trunk. Each stood with their heads lowered. They had not been visible to his eyes, only to the camera. Daniel zoomed in. The figures had no faces, only empty darkness where their features should have been. Yet every one of them seemed to be watching the same place. The unfinished carving. His carving. He backed away slowly. A dry branch snapped beneath his boot. Every shadow in the photograph had moved. Not in the forest, only inside the image. They were now facing him. Daniel checked the clearing. Nothing. Only the tree. He looked back at the photograph. The figures were one step closer. He dropped the camera. It struck the ground. The screen cracked. When he picked it up again, the shadows were gone. Daniel forced himself to leave the clearing. He followed bright orange ribbons he had tied to the trees on his way in. The first ribbon was gone, then the second, then the third. Only the knots remained. Someone, or something, had removed every strip of fabric. He was no longer following a trail. He was wandering. Hours passed. The sun should have begun setting. Instead, the light never changed. The forest remained trapped in a dull gray afternoon. Daniel checked his watch. 5:42 p.m. 5 minutes later, it still read 5:42. His phone showed no signal. Its clock had frozen as well. Time itself seemed to have stopped moving. Then, he saw a man standing between 2 trees, about 50 yards away. Dark jacket, mud-covered boots, motionless. Daniel called out. No answer. He stepped closer. The man slowly turned. Daniel recognized the face immediately. Thomas Elwood, the missing schoolteacher. His clothes were exactly the same as those shown in the police photographs. His skin looked pale. His eyes were empty. Not dead, not alive. Just empty. Thomas, Daniel shouted. The man smiled faintly, then pointed deeper into the forest. Without speaking, without blinking, Daniel took 1 step forward. Thomas disappeared. Not by running, not by hiding. One moment he was there. The next, only empty trees remained. Night finally arrived. Daniel somehow found the old ranger station again. He locked the door behind him. For the first time since entering Blackwood Forest, he felt almost safe. He connected the damaged camera to his laptop. Most of the files were corrupted. Only one video remained intact. It showed the giant tree from the moment he entered the clearing. Daniel skipped ahead. Nothing. Just silence. Then, at exactly 12 minutes into the recording, the camera tilted upward by itself. Daniel was nowhere near it. The lens focused on the trunk. The unfinished carving filled the frame. Without warning, a deep crack echoed through the wood. A new cut slowly appeared. No blade, no hand. The bark opened on its own, 1 letter at a time. The camera captured every second. The name became complete. Daniel Mercer. The final letter finished carving itself. Fresh sap flowed through every groove. Then the whisper returned, louder than ever before. Not one voice, thousands, speaking together. Perfectly clear. Now we remember you. The video ended. Daniel stared at the frozen screen. His name was no longer being carved. It was already there. And somewhere outside the cabin, something knocked once, slowly, against the wooden door. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, 3 times. Daniel held his breath. The cabin was silent, except for the sound of the rain tapping against the broken roof. Another knock, this time on the window. He slowly turned his flashlight toward the cracked glass. Nothing. Only darkness. Then a pale handprint appeared on the outside of the window. It slid downward and vanished. Daniel rushed outside. The clearing around the cabin was empty. No footprints. No movement. Only the cold fog drifting between the trees. Taint rose. D. _. Before dawn, he returned to the village. The priest was already waiting inside the church. When Daniel placed the laptop on the table and showed him the footage, the old man's face became pale. It finished. Daniel nodded. My name is complete. The priest closed his eyes. I prayed it wouldn't happen. What happens now? For a long moment, the old man said nothing. Then he unlocked a hidden compartment beneath the altar. Inside lay a weathered wooden box wrapped in faded cloth. He carried it carefully to the table. I hoped no one would ever need this again. Inside the box were handwritten pages, much older than the ranger's journal. The ink had faded to brown. The first page carried a date, October 14th, 1673. At the bottom was a signature, Father Matthias Keller. Daniel began reading. The priest who wrote the journal described a terrible winter. People had started disappearing from the village without explanation. Search parties always failed. Yet families claimed they still heard the missing calling from the forest. Some followed the voices. They disappeared as well. Fear spread through the valley. The villagers believed an evil spirit lived among the trees. But Father Matthias wrote something different. The forest does not hunt. The forest remembers. Daniel frowned. The priest nodded. Keep reading. Another passage explained the carvings. According to the journal, every human life left behind memories, most faded after death. But something beneath Blackwood Forest collected them. Not bodies, not souls, only memories. Names became the doorway. A name was enough to preserve a person's entire existence. The tree didn't trap the dead. It remembered everyone who crossed its boundary. Those people simply never found their way back. Daniel looked up. So they're alive? The priest answered carefully. No one knows. What people hear in the forest may only be memories speaking. Daniel thought about Thomas Elwood, the ranger, the countless voices. If they were only memories, why did they sound so real? The final pages described one desperate attempt to stop the disappearances. Villagers carved protective symbols around the oldest part of the forest, the same symbols Daniel had seen on the trees. For many years, the disappearances became rare, not because the forest had been defeated, because it had become patient, waiting, remembering. Daniel unfolded the ranger's map once more. A single thought struck him. The oak? The giant tree? They aren't the beginning. The priest looked at him. No, they're only markers. Then where does it start? The old man slowly pointed beneath the map. Not at a location, at the ground itself. It isn't inside the forest. The forest grew around it. Daniel felt a chill. Whatever existed beneath Blackwood had been there before the first tree, before the first village, perhaps before recorded history itself. Daniel packed his equipment one final time. I'm going back. The priest stepped in front of the church door. If you return, don't follow the voices. I won't. If you see someone you know, don't follow them. I understand. And if the forest offers you an answer, the old priest stopped speaking. Daniel waited. Finally he whispered, don't believe it. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, Daniel crossed the bridge for the last time. The forest seemed different, almost expectant. The wind carried hundreds of faint whispers. None of them spoke his name anymore. They already knew it. Deep inside the trees, beyond the ancient oak, a single light flickered. It had not been there before. Someone, or something, was waiting. Daniel stopped at the edge of the bridge. For the first time since arriving in Blackwood, the fear felt different. Before, he had been chasing a mystery. Now, the mystery was waiting for him. The light deep within the forest flickered once, then disappeared. He switched on every camera. One remained fixed to his backpack, recording everything in front of him. Another pointed behind him. If something followed, he wanted proof. The red recording light blinked steadily. He crossed into the trees. The forest no longer felt silent. The whispers were everywhere. Not loud, not threatening, almost welcoming. They no longer repeated his name. Instead, they spoke the names of hundreds of strangers. Some sounded ancient, others sounded modern. Every voice overlapped the next, until the forest itself seemed alive. Daniel followed the faint glow through the darkness. The deeper he walked, the more familiar the path became. Without realizing it, he arrived at the giant tree again. The clearing was empty. The light had vanished. Only the enormous trunk stood before him. His completed name was exactly where he had seen it before. Fresh, untouched, as if it had been carved only moments ago. Daniel placed a second camera on a fallen log. It pointed directly at the trunk. He stepped back. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. The forest remained perfectly still. Then, a figure emerged from between the trees. Daniel froze. It was Thomas Elwood, the missing schoolteacher. He looked exactly as before. Pale skin, mud-stained clothes, empty eyes. This time, Thomas spoke. His voice was calm. "You came back." Daniel's throat tightened. "Who are you?" Thomas smiled faintly. "I remember. What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Thomas slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the base of the giant tree. There, Daniel looked down. Half buried beneath thick roots was a narrow opening in the earth. A staircase, stone steps disappearing into complete darkness. It had never been there before. When Daniel looked back, Thomas was gone. Thomas. The whispers stopped. Every sound vanished. Daniel stood alone. He aimed his flashlight into the opening. The staircase seemed ancient. Its walls were carved from solid rock. Symbols covered every surface. The same symbols protecting the village. Except these had been scratched apart, broken, as if someone had destroyed the seal from below. Daniel took one slow step downward, then another. The temperature dropped sharply. The air smelled damp, ancient. The tunnel finally opened into a circular chamber beneath the forest. His flashlight swept across the walls. Names. Thousands of names. Not carved into wood, carved into stone. Some so old they had nearly worn away. Others looked fresh. In the center of the chamber stood a massive black stone unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Its surface reflected no light. It looked less like rock, and more like a hole cut into reality. Then the whispers returned, not from the forest, not from above, from inside the stone. Hundreds of voices, perfectly together. "We remember." Daniel stepped closer. The camera continued recording. His flashlight flickered. The voices grew louder. One final sentence echoed through the chamber. "You came because you wanted the truth." Daniel whispered. "What are you?" The voices answered. "We are everyone who was never forgotten." The chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The camera slipped from Daniel's hand. It landed facing the black stone. The recording continued. Daniel reached toward it. Then, the video glitched. Static filled the screen. For exactly 19 seconds. When the image returned, Daniel was gone. The flashlight lay on the floor. His backpack remained beside the stone. The chamber was empty. Only the whispers remained. Still repeating, "We remember." The recording continued for another 12 minutes. At the very end, slow footsteps approached the fallen camera. Someone stopped directly in front of it. Only a pair of muddy boots entered the frame. A familiar voice whispered one final sentence. "Tell them not to follow." The screen went black. Daniel Mercer was never seen again. Police searched Blackwood Forest for 12 days. More than 100 volunteers joined the operation. Drones scanned every trail. Dogs searched every valley. Nothing was found. No footprints, no clothing, no body. It was as if Daniel had simply ceased to exist. And the final video recorded beneath the forest. Investigators watched the footage dozens of times. Experts examined every frame. No signs of editing were found. No hidden cuts. No visual effects. Yet no one could explain how a man could disappear in the middle of a brightly lit chamber. Officially, the case remained unsolved. News of Daniel's disappearance spread across Europe. For several weeks, Blackwood Forest attracted journalists, investigators, and curiosity seekers. Many attempted to locate the giant tree. None succeeded. Some found the ancient oak. Others claimed the forest changed around them, trails vanished, compasses failed, maps no longer matched the landscape. Within months, the attention faded. The world moved on. Blackwood Forest returned to silence. The village remained exactly the same. No one celebrated. No one spoke about Daniel. When strangers asked questions, they were told only one thing: leave before sunset. The priest locked Father Matthias's journal back beneath the church altar. The ranger's notebook was placed beside it. 2 stories, separated by centuries, ending the same way. Several months later, a forestry worker entered Blackwood while marking damaged trees after a winter storm. He claimed he had become lost for less than an hour. During that time, he found an enormous oak unlike anything on the official maps. He photographed it, thinking it would interest local historians. When he returned home, he enlarged one of the images. The bark was covered in names, thousands of them. Near the center, he recognized one immediately, Elias Brenner. Below it, another, Thomas Elwood. Then, just beneath those, one name stood out. The carving looked fresh. Sap still glistened inside the letters. It read, Daniel Mercer. The forestry worker swore the name had not been there when he took the photograph. He refused to enter Blackwood Forest again. Years passed. New disappearances slowly replaced old ones. Different people, different generations. The stories never changed. Someone would vanish. Searches would fail. Families would report hearing familiar voices drifting through the trees. Most ignored them. A few followed. None returned. _nond. Today, the old village still exists. Visitors occasionally ask about Blackwood Forest. Most locals simply shake their heads. The priest who warned Daniel is gone now. His successor keeps the same journals locked beneath the altar. Every generation adds new pages. Every generation records new names. No one knows how many are carved into the ancient trees anymore. No one agrees on where the forest truly begins, and no one has ever explained who carves the names, or why they always appear before someone disappears. Some believe the whispers belong to ghosts. Others believe they are only echoes of forgotten lives. A few insist the entire story is nothing more than folklore. Perhaps they're right, perhaps not, because every few years, someone uploads a photograph from deep inside Blackwood Forest. The image is always blurry, always taken in fading light, always showing the same impossible tree. Covered in names, researchers enlarge the photographs, comparing them with older images. And every time, the count is different. There is always one more name than before, one more person remembered, one more mystery with no answer. So if you ever find yourself walking through an old forest, and you discover your name carved into the bark of a tree, don't touch it. Don't answer if something whispers your name. And whatever you do, don't follow the voices, because some places don't keep bodies. They don't keep bones. They don't even keep secrets. The forest keeps the names.